Welcome back to the Crypto Intellect, everybody. XRP holders, today might be one of those moments where the market finally gives us an answer. And listen, before anybody panics, before the keyboard warriors jump into the comments saying the sky is falling, just hear me out for a second, because what we are watching right now could become a very important turning point, not just for XRP, not just for crypto, but for the entire financial market. Earlier today, people were acting like XRP went to zero, and honestly, the mood across social media has been absolutely insane. Fear everywhere, confusion everywhere, people calling for crashes, people calling for moonshots, and in the middle of all of that chaos, we're trying to figure out what actually matters. That's why today matters so much. XRP right now is sitting around that key support level after several rough red days in a row, and everybody's asking the same question. Is this finally the reversal, or are we about to see another wave of pain hit the market? That's what we're digging into today, because whether you're bullish or bearish, whether you're holding long-term or trading short-term, something big feels like it's brewing right now. The interesting thing is that the crypto market overall feels completely disconnected emotionally from what's happening underneath the surface. People are bored, people are frustrated, viewership across crypto channels is slowing down, and historically those are the moments when markets love to surprise everybody. XRP has been holding around the mid-$1 range while Bitcoin continues hovering around those major support channels. Ethereum is trying to stabilize, Solana has seen heavy selling pressure, and yet despite all of that, we're still not seeing a total collapse. That's important because usually when markets truly break down, fear becomes overwhelming and price action gets violent very quickly. Instead, what we're seeing feels more like uncertainty. Traders don't know what direction to commit to because there are still massive catalysts sitting on the horizon. And when markets get stuck between fear and hope, sometimes all it takes is one major headline to trigger a huge move. That's why everybody is watching today so closely, because this could be the calm before something much bigger begins. Maybe it's a breakout, maybe it's another fake out, but either way, volatility looks like it's getting ready to return. Now, one of the biggest stories affecting markets right now is the political situation involving President Trump and rising tensions globally. Investors are trying to price in every possible scenario at the same time, and honestly, that's almost impossible to do. There are reports that lawmakers are pushing for congressional approval requirements before any larger military escalation involving Iran can continue, and if that situation cools off, that could immediately impact oil prices, equities, and crypto sentiment altogether. Markets hate uncertainty more than anything else. Traders can handle bad news, but they struggle when they don't know what comes next. That's exactly where we are right now. Every headline seems capable of moving billions of dollars in seconds. One moment people think risk assets are dead, the next moment markets rally because somebody says negotiations are improving. XRP and crypto are getting pulled around by macro events whether people like it or not. This isn't just about charts anymore. This is about interest rates, geopolitics, regulation, liquidity, and investor psychology all colliding at the same time. That's why today feels so critical, because eventually the market is going to pick a direction. And speaking of direction, we need to talk about the Federal Reserve, because this is where things start getting really interesting for crypto. Right now, markets are pricing in almost no chance of meaningful rate cuts anytime soon. In fact, some analysts are now saying there's even a growing probability of another rate hike before things start easing again. Think about how crazy that sounds considering where sentiment was just months ago. Everybody expected aggressive cuts, easy money, and a massive liquidity wave rushing back into crypto. Instead, inflation remains stubborn, the economy hasn't fully cracked, and the Fed keeps signaling patience. Historically, the biggest crypto bull runs happened when interest rates were extremely low. Back in 2017, rates were low. In 2021, they were basically near zero after the pandemic stimulus wave. That easy money environment created the fuel for massive speculative rallies. But now we're in a completely different environment, and that's why some investors are nervous. They're asking whether crypto can truly enter another explosive phase while rates stay elevated. That's a fair question, and honestly, nobody knows the answer yet, because this cycle is unlike anything we've seen before. At the same time, though, crypto has a way of moving when people least expect it. If you go back and study previous XRP rallies, not every breakout happened because of some gigantic, obvious catalyst. Sometimes the market simply turned because sentiment became too negative for too long. That's why I keep saying today matters psychologically as much as technically. Everybody is waiting for the perfect reason before they believe again. Everybody wants confirmation. Everybody wants certainty. But markets rarely give you certainty before they move. Last year, there were moments when XRP rallied hard, even though headlines were relatively quiet. The market just suddenly decided enough fear had already been priced in. Could that happen again? Absolutely. Does it guarantee anything? Of course not. But when you start seeing exhaustion in selling pressure combined with increasing discussion about regulation, adoption, and institutional access, you at least have to pay attention. This is where patient investors separate themselves from emotional traders, because the hardest moments to hold conviction are often the moments that matter most later on. Another thing people are noticing right now is that retail attention has shifted heavily toward the stock market again. You can feel it everywhere online. AI stocks are exploding, major tech companies are dominating headlines, and crypto has lost some of that mainstream excitement it had during the peak hype phases. Honestly, that's affecting the entire ecosystem. Engagement is down, excitement is down, and people are chasing whatever sector looks hottest in the moment. But markets move in cycles. They always do. There are times when crypto dominates attention, and there are times when stocks dominate attention. Right now, we're clearly in a period where many investors are focusing more on traditional markets, because that's where momentum has been strongest recently. But what happens when those profits rotate? What happens if institutions start reallocating capital toward digital assets again? That's the question smart investors are quietly asking themselves. XRP especially remains one of the most watched assets because of its connection to payments, regulation, and broader financial infrastructure discussions. Even people who dislike XRP still pay attention to it because they know it carries enormous influence inside the crypto space. And then we have the upcoming legislation discussions that could completely reshape how crypto operates in the United States. This is another reason why today feels so important. Lawmakers are continuing to push forward with major regulatory frameworks aimed at creating clearer rules for the industry. The Clarity Act discussions have become a massive focal point because investors believe regulatory certainty could unlock a new wave of institutional participation. For years, crypto companies complained about operating inside gray areas with unclear enforcement and inconsistent guidance. Now there's finally momentum building around structured legislation. If meaningful crypto laws actually get passed and signed into effect, that changes the entire conversation overnight. Suddenly, large institutions that were previously hesitant may feel more comfortable participating. Suddenly, payment companies, banks, and fintech firms could move more aggressively into blockchain integration. XRP holders especially are watching this closely because regulatory clarity has always been one of the biggest narratives surrounding Ripple and the XRP ecosystem. If that clarity finally arrives, many investors believe it could become the catalyst that changes everything. What makes this even more fascinating is how divided the market still is despite all these developments. Some people think crypto is entering another long, painful sideways phase. Others think this is the setup before the next massive expansion wave. And honestly, both sides can make reasonable arguments right now. On one hand, liquidity conditions remain tight compared to previous cycles, and macro uncertainty continues hanging over the market. On the other hand, institutional infrastructure for crypto is stronger than it has ever been before. We now have major firms exploring tokenization, blockchain settlements, digital payment systems, and crypto ETFs in ways that were almost unthinkable years ago. XRP keeps showing up in those conversations because of its focus on payments and cross-border efficiency. That doesn't automatically guarantee price explosions tomorrow morning, but it does show that the asset remains relevant at the highest levels of financial discussion. Sometimes people forget that relevance matters during quieter periods because surviving difficult environments is often what positions projects for bigger opportunities later. One thing I want everybody to remember is how emotional markets become near turning points. When prices are exploding upward, people suddenly believe nothing can go wrong. When prices slow down or pull back, those same people act like everything is over forever. We've seen this cycle repeat over and over again in crypto. XRP holders know this better than almost anybody because this community has been through lawsuits, crashes, regulatory uncertainty, exchange delistings, and non-stop criticism for years. Yet despite all of that, XRP continues remaining one of the largest and most discussed cryptocurrencies on the planet. That alone says something important. The market continues paying attention because people know there's still unfinished business here. Every time it feels like interest disappears completely, some new development pulls XRP right back into the spotlight again. Maybe it's regulatory news, maybe it's adoption headlines, maybe it's macro shifts, but something always seems to reignite discussion. That's why today's environment feels so important because it resembles previous periods where sentiment became extremely divided right before volatility returned in a major way. Now let's talk about Nvidia earnings because even though crypto and tech stocks have somewhat detached recently, investors are still watching these earnings reports very closely. Nvidia has become one of the most influential companies in the world because AI enthusiasm is driving enormous amounts of capital into the technology sector. Whenever Nvidia reports earnings, the entire market pays attention because investors view it as a signal for risk appetite and future growth expectations. If Nvidia crushes expectations again, that could inject confidence back into broader markets, and sometimes that confidence spills into crypto as well. Does it always happen directly? No. Crypto has increasingly developed its own independent narratives. But there are still moments where strong equity performance helps create a more optimistic environment overall. Traders start feeling more comfortable taking risk. Algorithms respond to momentum. Sentiment improves. That's why even crypto investors who don't care about stocks are still paying attention tonight, because one strong market reaction could shift the tone heading into the rest of the week. At the same time, there's still a lot of caution underneath the surface. Investors have become extremely sensitive to disappointments because this market has punished overconfidence repeatedly. Every rally attempt lately has faced skepticism almost immediately. People are scared of getting trapped. They remember previous fake breakouts and sudden reversals. That caution is understandable, but sometimes excessive caution can also become fuel for future rallies. If too many people position defensively and the market unexpectedly moves higher, short covering and fear of missing out can create powerful momentum very quickly. XRP especially has a history of violent explosive moves once momentum finally returns. That's why even though the charts may look boring right now, many traders are still paying extremely close attention because they know how fast conditions can change. One day everybody is calling crypto dead, and then suddenly the entire market wakes up again overnight. We've literally seen that happen multiple times before, and nobody wants to be caught completely unprepared if it happens again. Another thing we need to discuss is security, because scams are getting absolutely ridiculous right now. There are fake accounts everywhere pretending to be influencers, analysts, and even financial media personalities. Some accounts are posting fake token launches, fake giveaways, and fake investment opportunities trying to take advantage of confused investors during uncertain markets. If you see posts promising guaranteed profits or surprise token launches connected to major personalities, be extremely careful. Scammers love periods like this because emotions are already elevated and people become easier to manipulate. The best thing you can do right now is slow down and verify everything before interacting with links or sending funds anywhere. Real opportunities do not require panic decisions in 30 seconds. XRP holders especially need to stay alert because large crypto communities often become targets during major market events. The amount of fake excitement circulating online right now is honestly insane, and protecting your capital is just as important as trying to grow it. In this environment, discipline matters more than hype. Meanwhile, lawmakers continue pushing conversations around financial innovation and payment systems. There's increasing discussion about modernizing outdated banking infrastructure and creating more competitive access for fintech companies and digital payment providers. That matters for XRP because one of Ripple's core narratives has always centered around improving global payments and settlement efficiency. If governments and regulators genuinely begin opening doors for more blockchain-based financial innovation, XRP could benefit from that shift in perception. For years, critics argued that traditional institutions would never seriously engage with blockchain technology, but now we're seeing governments, banks, and payment firms openly discussing tokenization, digital currencies, and blockchain settlements. The conversation has changed dramatically. Even if adoption moves slower than some people hope, the direction itself matters. Markets often price in future expectations long before full implementation happens. That's why regulatory headlines and policy discussions continue influencing XRP sentiment so heavily, because investors are trying to anticipate where the financial world is heading next. What's also fascinating is how much patience this market is demanding from investors right now. Everybody wants immediate action. Everybody wants instant gains. But some of the biggest opportunities in investing require surviving long periods where nothing exciting seems to happen. That's emotionally difficult, especially in crypto where volatility conditions people to expect constant adrenaline. But sometimes accumulation phases and quiet periods are exactly what set the foundation for larger future moves. I know a lot of people are frustrated. I know some holders expected XRP to already be at much higher levels by now, but investing timelines rarely unfold perfectly according to social media expectations. Markets move based on liquidity, macro conditions, regulation, psychology, and timing. Sometimes all of those pieces align quickly, and sometimes they take much longer than expected. The important thing is understanding why you're invested in the first place and whether the core thesis still makes sense to you personally. Emotional reactions to short-term volatility often lead investors into terrible decisions. And honestly, today feels like one of those moments where the market is searching for direction in real time. You can almost feel the tension building across crypto communities. Bulls are looking for confirmation. Bears are looking for breakdowns. Traders are watching every candle move like it's life or death. Meanwhile, long-term investors are trying to zoom out and focus on the bigger picture instead of every hourly fluctuation. XRP, sitting near these key levels while major regulatory and macro developments continue unfolding, creates an environment where literally one strong catalyst could shift momentum dramatically. Maybe that catalyst arrives today. Maybe it arrives next month. Nobody knows for certain. But the amount of attention focused on XRP right now tells you everything you need to know about how important this asset still is within the broader crypto conversation. Love it or hate it, people continue watching XRP because they know it has the potential to surprise the market when conditions finally align. So, as we move through the rest of today, keep your eyes on the charts, keep your emotions under control, and pay attention to the headlines because this market can change incredibly fast. Whether it's Federal Reserve policy, Nvidia earnings, geopolitical developments, or crypto legislation, there are multiple major forces colliding at once right now. XRP holders have been waiting for clarity for a very long time, and maybe, just maybe, we're finally approaching the point where the market gets the answer it's been waiting for. That doesn't mean tomorrow automatically becomes a moonshot, but it does mean the setup is becoming increasingly interesting. We've seen fear dominate sentiment for weeks now, and historically markets tend to move hardest when the majority least expect it. So let me know what you think. Are we finally about to see a recovery start here? Is the sell-off exhausted? Or do you think more volatility is still coming before the real breakout happens? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the Crypto Intellect if you haven't already, and like I always say, let's make a lot of money.